So here you see the finished modifications to this inner cylinder baffle. There are some obvious leak points down in these corners here, and I filled those up with some red RTV. Those will probably get more added to them when this is actually in place, because I think there's going to be some leakage out here as well. But that's yet to be seen. Once these are in place, I can come back and fix these corners a little bit more. But for now, I wanted to make sure that I got some on the inside just to make sure that that stays sealed. The black, what do I want to call it? They call it a fabric, but it's like a black rubber, just the regular baffle seal, cut to shape and installed. Of course, the screws that I talked about earlier, those are obviously still in place. So this is going to sit and dry for a while. These sit really nice just into the RTV. This one here was trying to roll up on me a little bit. That's the only reason why I clipped it. But you don't necessarily want to clamp these tight because it will squish all the RTV completely out, and you don't want that. So put down a bead or two of RTV and kind of smush these down into it, and that's it. Try to squeeze out any air that might be trapped underneath there. But the bottom line is you don't want to completely squish out the RTV. So what I'm planning to do now, I've kind of changed my mind a little bit yet again. Before I get too carried away with fitting this baffle and trying to get these curves bent correctly, I want to go ahead and install the baffle seal along the top. So here's how I do that. This has got an odd shape to it, so it was just a matter of simply flipping this over, hang it off the corner of a bench like this, and then run here. I'll do it here. Hang it off the corner of the bench like this. Have your black seal underneath it, and then just trace the contour of that top edge directly onto the baffle material. That's all you got to do. Once that is traced, on this end here, you want to add maybe 2 inches so that you'll have some overlap between this baffle piece and this baffle piece. This seal will overlap a couple inches, and then this seal will overlap a couple. So once you have this contour drawn, all you need to do is take a ruler, and from that edge that is now traced onto your black fabric, you just take your ruler at various points along that edge and come down however thick you want your baffle seal to be. I'm making mine 2.5 inches. So I just come along the top of this curve, the edge of this curve. I measure down 2.5 inches and I put a little tick mark. Here is the piece already cut and finished. So this was the edge that was traced from this edge. Once I had that line drawn, all I had to do with the ruler was come down at various points 2.5 inches and make a mark. And I did that like every 1/2 inch along the way, along this whole contour. After I have all my tick marks laid out, it was just a matter of connecting the dots, adding the 2 inches to this end here, and then cutting it with a pair of scissors. And then of course now this is pretty darn close to perfect to match the contour of the baffle itself. It's basically going to go on something like that. So now what am I doing? Next up is I want to drill holes into the aluminum first that are going to hold the rivets to attach the baffle material. So what I do is I come down from this top edge, I come down a 1/2 inch, and again, using a ruler, I come down a 1/2 inch and I make a tick mark like every 1/2 inch or so. Make a bunch of those little tick marks along this whole edge, and then I come back and I connect all the dots, and you can kind of see maybe the tick marks along the way underneath. And I connect all of the dots, and now I've got my 1/2 inch edge distance from this top here to go ahead and figure out where I want to put holes. So of course everybody's baffle is going to be different because everybody's situation is different. You can see I've got some obstructions in the way. I've got a corner here that I'm going to have to deal with because I can't put a rivet as close to this edge as I would like to do it. So I'll have to deal with that, and I've got to deal with these 2 obstructions. But anyway, I've got my line drawn, and I just need to figure out where exactly I want to put the individual holes for the rivets. So I'm going to work on that now. I got to keep in mind that there's a bracket here, so I got to stay away from that bracket. I got to maintain edge distance from these ports, and of course I got to maintain some edge distance here and along here. So the plan is to get that figured out, get that laid out, and I'm going to go ahead and drill all these holes. I think I'll under drill them. Maybe I'll just drill them to a number 40 first. And then I will take the baffle material and I'll do the same thing from the bottom edge. I'll measure up a 1/2 inch. I'll put all my tick marks. I'll come back, I'll connect the dots. And then I'll take that and I'll put it underneath the baffle as best I can, if I can. And make sure that the line that I had just drawn shows up through the holes that are in the baffle material, and then mark and drill the holes on this. And they should then, of course, basically be match drilled. I'll get into that when I get to it, but for now, let me get these holes figured out and get those drilled. Talk to you guys later. Howdy everyone, making progress here on these baffles with the seals. So again, just to recap a little bit, this is my line drawn from this top edge. This is about a 1/2 inch down. Spacing is roughly 1.5 inches, but I put holes wherever I could that made sense and that would fit. Got a couple of things in the way, so I had to put holes around those. This is a flanged piece. You can see here, so I had to keep this hole, a good edge distance away from this flange piece. So just things to keep in mind when you're laying your stuff out. So once I had the line drawn and these holes made, I had already cut to shape the rubber seal, and I had also, with the rubber seal from the bottom edge up, I had measured a 1/2 inch, made all my little tick marks, then I connected the dots. I use a silver Sharpie, which shows up really nice on the black. Once I had that line drawn, it was just a matter of, like we've done before, to hold this up from underneath, to put the fabric up underneath, sight down through the holes. Actually, I think I did it. This was not here, this was off, so this face was nice and flat. So I had my my rubber fabric down, and then I had this piece was laying on top of it. I can't do it one-handed, but you get the idea. This piece was laying on top of the black. I could see the silver Sharpie line through these holes. And then it was just a matter of taking a black Sharpie, marking these holes which showed up really nice on the silver line. And then I just took this and I took this and drilled these individual holes. What I highly recommend is once you get these holes drilled, to verify that this will cleco into place nicely with the holes on the aluminum. Once you've confirmed that it fits, drill these holes out quite large. The pulled rivets are 1/8 of an inch in diameter-ish. So these holes are number 30. These holes I drilled up to, I think, a number 19. I used a number 19 drill bit to drill these holes. That makes the clecos slide in easier. When it comes to rivet, the rivets slide in easier, and you don't get the pillowing in between as much. You don't get the rubbers to pucker as much if these holes are large and it's got room to kind of settle in. I believe I used a 19 drill bit. If I were to do it again, or maybe some of the other pieces that I'll be doing, I might go bigger than that. But anywho, just make the holes in the rubber nice and large, and it will solve some of the pillowing and wrinkly problem. So now that I've got this drilled and I've got my seal drilled, I had this clecoed in place and it fit just fine. I had to come back and cut out holes for these different pieces that are in the way. I'll have to seal this really well with some RTV. I'm also thinking of using some of the aluminum, we call it speed tape, like, what is it, inch and a half wide speed tape, and just taping that across wherever this edge is. The RTV is fine, but when you start bending this around, this being rubber and being pretty smooth, the RTV tends to peel off of this. So I'm not too keen on using a lot of RTV. I will, like I had done the other one, I'll put it between the black and the aluminum. But as far as sealing edges and keeping things from peeling out, it really doesn't do that great. So I may come back with some of that aluminum tape and just tape over some of these areas, but that will come later. So now this is ready to be put in. While I had this in place, not that it matters, it didn't need to be in place. Once I was done fitting this, I took the baffle and I was, again, like I had done the other side, and we've done many other things, put it in, look what needs to be adjusted, take it out, make the adjustments, put it back in, etc. There's a bolt that comes in from the back that sticks through this hole. That bolt's got a spacer on it. That spacer length needs to be adjusted so that this edge will rest up against the engine block. If that spacer is too long, it pushes this forward, and this will not sit up against the engine block. So you got to keep shaving that back until this edge here fits nice against the engine block. And you want to make sure that the bolt is long enough that you can get a nut on there with a couple of threads showing. And then you've got to work on the bends for the cylinders. Like I said, I want to get these pre-bends as close as I can get them within reason before I put the rubber on. And then while I had this in place, I also roughly marked out the top of the cylinder. So this whole area, this curve all the way up to this marker line, that's all going to get pieces of rubber because the cylinder sits right in here. This one gets rubber right up into this edge. I'll probably come past the edge a little bit, but it's going to basically just rest right here. There won't be any rubber extending up into here because there's no cylinder. Here is the piece that I was working on yesterday. This is now done. You can see the rubber pieces are in place. These are the contact areas of the fins. So the air comes down between the cylinders and fills this void and then gets pushed through the fins because it can't get past the rubber, so it gets forced through the fins of the cylinder kind of in this orientation. So these are the only contact points. And like I said, I gooped up these corners a little bit. These will get revisited once this is actually installed. So that's about it. So what I'm going to do now is I've started on this side, just like I had done before. I figured out where I wanted. I came down my 1/2 inch, drew my line, and then I figured out what made the most sense for these holes. Remember that this front piece, this front baffle has this ledge here. That ledge piece kind of tucks in and around this back baffle. So when you put this hole in place, make sure that that hole is far enough away from the edge of this right here. You can see that here. So when this slides into place, you want this front hole here to clear this part. Again, just things to keep in mind when you're laying stuff out. So now I've got these holes laid. I'm going to take another strip of my black here. You can see the silver marker has already been drawn 1/2 inch from the bottom. So I'll just take this piece, I'll cut it to a rough length. I'll lay it on here. I'll lay it behind here. I'll sight through each of these holes so that I can see the silver line. And then I'll take a black Sharpie and I'll just go through and mark these holes directly onto that silver line. And then I'll drill those holes up to a number 19 or larger drill. And then I can start fitting that. Once I have that piece fitted, this piece is already done. Then I can go ahead and clean everything nicely and put down some RTV and then rivet those pieces of rubber into place. And then I can come back and start cutting and laying in my rubber in here. All right, so that's kind of the plan. I'm going to go ahead and get this piece made and see if I can't do some riveting. All right, talk to you guys later.